Day 4 of the U.S. Olympic trials had some of the most surprising finishes that we've seen so far. We're going to cover those today. The first one being Athing Mu, who ended up stumbling, falling, didn't make the team, and she's somebody that is a defending Olympic champion, world champion, was the youngest woman to win both the world championship and the gold medal in the Olympics. And then another big one was Quincy Hall, the fact that he was able to beat Michael Norman by a good amount, and also having Quincy Wilson in the final was also a awesome thing to be able to see at just 16 years old. We're going to follow all those and we're going to hop right into it. So when somebody like Athing Mu ends up stumbling, she really doesn't have much of an opportunity to get back, and we're going to go and take a look at this. So the start was a pretty normal start, nothing crazy here. I mean, in the 800, there's not a huge focus on having a great start. You obviously don't want to be put in a bad position. Again, nothing too crazy. This is something that I guess a lot of the analysts have kind of said with Athing Mu is like her legs are so long that she kind of puts herself at a bit of a risk for something like this happening. And what was surprising about this is, to me, just the lack of ability to properly respond to the situation. So we see Raven Rogers, and it just kind of nicked her. To me, it doesn't look like there's anything malicious going on here, because she's going and extending the leg. She's trying to land. As she's going to land, you can see Athing Mu is looking to figure out her positioning with some of the other women. Ended up just kind of nicking. Again, Raven Rogers is going through a normal step. Athing Mu is kind of coming across, ends up kind of nicking her shin, and just that foot bounces off to the side. She ends up kicking herself here and then falls and stumbles. And to me, this is where it gets interesting in terms of what the response could be, right? So I know playing football and wrestling and watching even UFC a good amount, I think falling, there's an art to falling, right? You could see some of these guys and they do a great job of being able to fall and stumble, or somebody gets taken down, they're able to get back up very, very effectively. So I just think that as she fell here, she fell, and unfortunately, and not surprisingly, she kind of had to protect herself, right? So immediately from this position, I think that she did a fine job of just kind of being able to roll and protect herself. I do think if she just fell and kind of rolled right into or got to this position, stopped, and then just got her knees right back up, feet back up right from here, instead of going here, falling onto her back, I think that she probably could have gotten up a lot quicker, right? So it's almost like a thing to consider. And obviously when something like this happens, then you could look back and say, okay, you could have done this, could have done that, blah, blah, blah. But it is something, if you're watching the 800, or if you're somebody that runs the 800, this is something to consider. Like when you fall, not that it's going to happen very often, but let's just have a good response, because she falls here. I think she could have just stopped her momentum at this point, and then she wouldn't have rolling over even from that position. Probably could have been able to stop herself right there, get right back up. Instead, she rolls over, has to protect herself, kind of flings her feet up, and is still down. Like there's almost no attempt to like hurry to get back up at this position. So now by the time she gets up, she's like way back behind. She's not even in the screen at this point, right? So it just shows that you could end up going and I think being a little bit better prepared from that position. We saw a pretty good finish here. I'm just going to fast forward through the last part here. I don't follow the women's 800 a ton. Obviously, Athing Mu is somebody that we've done a breakdown on and has some interesting things. So I just wanted to cover this. But Nia Atkins ended up winning with 157, which was a great time. I think that was their fastest time. Season best for Ali Wilson, 158. All of them did pretty good. Nia Atkins was out in front by a good amount here. Tough to say, where she would have been in comparison to Athing Mu. It's tough to say where Ali Wilson and Juliet Whitaker could have been, but obviously they put themselves in a great position to win at the beginning. They're out in front a little bit more at the beginning, or a little bit more on the inside. So when Athing Mu went down, they were able to respond accordingly. Now to transition into the 400, this was awesome. So we have here all the way down out here in lane 2 is Quincy Wilson. He is a 16-year-old and is already in the 400-meter Olympic final, which is crazy. He ran a personal best of 44:59 on Sunday to be able to qualify 44.59 at 16 years old. That's just unbelievable. So we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the things he's doing from a mechanic perspective. But we'll just look at the whole 400 meter in general. We have Michael Norman. He's a big favorite. We have Quincy Hall, who ended up winning the whole thing. We have Vernon Norwood as well, who was able to beat Quincy Wilson in the semifinals and is also somebody that we're continuing to follow, continuing to watch. So it's a stacked field. Everybody here is able to run really fast. We have Matthew Bowling. I mean, there's a lot of really good athletes here within the final. And what stood out to me here is obviously we have two people getting out very, very quickly with Michael Norman and Matthew Bowling. And then also Quincy Wilson is really staying back. Lane 1 ends up taking up that stagger pretty quickly. Yeah, Matthew Bowling and Michael Norman ended up both making up their staggers pretty quickly as well. In the first 100, Michael Norman ran 10.82. Matthew Bowling running 10.68. 10.68 in the first 100 for Matthew Bowling. I mean, that to me is crazy. And then in the second 100, we had 10.25 from Matthew Bowling. That's what we're seeing right now. And then we also had a 10.09 from Michael Norman. For Quincy Wilson, just to give you guys an idea, we had a 11.29 in the first 100, and then we had a 10.43 in the second 100. So he's at 21.7 after the first 200, where Michael Norman's at 20.9. So it's almost a whole second ahead. Quincy Hall ran a 21.52. So again, about 0.6 of a second behind Michael Norman at that point. And then we start to see the beginning of the fall off with Michael Norman. We also have Matthew Bowling pretty far ahead from everybody in second place going into this final turn. Now is when it gets interesting. We see with Quincy Hall, he does a great job, really gets his head into it, and he's really extending, he's really reaching out with his arms. This is something that we kind of saw with Sha'Carri Richardson as well, just that reach with the arms out in front and then pulling back. I like that action, right? Like I like the reaching out in front with the arms. I see sometimes people want to have this action of really reaching up. I know that Carl Lewis talked about how it's important to get cheek to cheek, right? So kind of get your hand up here and then your other hand to get to the other cheek. But we could see, especially in the 400, it really helps to get that length in the arms to really make it so you have the ability to get great extension on each one of the steps. We could see Michael Norman in this position. You know, he's just not as long with his stride, not as long with his arms, getting really stuck with his feet back behind him. I mean, Quincy Hall gets a little bit stuck with his feet back behind him as well, but he's just got so much length with his arm out in front that it helps him in being able to maintain this like upright position. And Michael Norman almost ended up losing this to Chris Bailey here. So he was out so far in front in the 100 and that, or by the last 300, and then just started to slowly get beat. And then same thing with Matthew Bowling. Matthew Bowling is way out in front of everybody going into that final 100. And then he ran, what did he run? 12.83 in the last 100. Michael Norman ran 12.26. Quincy Hall ran 11.58. Just to give you an idea, so almost caught up by a second with them. Quincy Wilson ran 11.98. So, you know, really, if you could run under 12 seconds in that last 100, that puts you in a great position to be able to run a really, really good time, really elite time. Obviously, with Michael Norman and Matthew Bowling, they're both running low 10s in the first 200. That's kind of a rare thing to be able to do, but then they lost it at the end running 12 seconds in that last 100. I thought it was great when they did an interview with Quincy Hall, and I'll just kind of play this here where they're asking him about like how did he end up finishing the way that he did. I'm going to hopefully turn this down, but I think you guys should still be able to hear. I don't want it to be like an echo here. So essentially they ask him like, how did you end up pushing through? Like, you know, like obviously you're behind. What did you do to finish? You know, like how were you able to finish as well as you did? And this is his response.
Get home, son. Get home, son. That's all I tell myself before I run is get home, son. It's that dog in me. And that's what
I got that dog in me. I love that. I love that. And I almost feel like that was like almost intimidating to like Michael Norman. Like then when they talked to Michael Norman, he didn't really know what to say. Like his response was much more of like this very technically like, oh yeah, I talked to my coach about what I should be doing and my, you know, this technical analysis. And you have Quincy Hall that just like came from way back and just like, I got that dog in me. Like I'm a dog. So I wanted to add that in. I thought that was great. So now good to go into Quincy Wilson. I know a lot of you guys want to be able to look more in depth and I'll probably do a video that's just a Quincy Quincy Wilson breakdown. But what stands out to me with him is he has just so much extension in his arms as he's going through, especially his right arm. He gets like a ton of action going all the way back with that right arm. And, you know, he's somebody that's going to be a stud. Obviously, he's very young, only 16 years old, and he really is not very technically sound. If we go in and we'll go back a little bit here and see like the last kind of 50 meters here, we could see like Michael Norman, very technically sound, you know, looking at his running, his arm swing, things like that. Where you look at Quincy Wilson, he is not anything close to that, right? His head's way up, his arms are swinging way to the side, his legs are crossing over a good amount. So he really is not that technically sound. He has a great ability to extend. He's got that dog in him as well, let's say. And again, he has that really good arm swing. I like how he brings that right arm all the way back. He's quick with the left and then brings that right arm all the way back. And that really allows him to be able to create both reach and as well as extension in his arms, where you can see almost like Matthew Bowling, he's really tight. He's really stiff. He's not getting almost any extension out of that right arm as he's going back. Gets a little bit more extension out of the left arm, but look at how much extension we could see with Quincy Wilson. Like he's getting way back there with that right arm. He gets that initial action here, and then that hand and arm is way back behind him at this position, and that allows him to really create a lot of pull within that leg, right? So now as he's getting that action with the right arm, that's helping him create that pull with that left leg and get plenty of range through there, and then gives him the opportunity to be able to reach with that right leg. I think he can get a lot more technically sound for sure, but I think there's a lot to be said about where he's at technically for the age that he's at, as well as how good of a job that he was able to do and being able to just kind of hard it out, and some of the things that are exciting for his future. Like as he gets some of these things a little bit more cleaned up, obviously, like Quincy Hall is another person that is not the most sound, we could say, technically. And there's a time period within, especially the 400, where it's like the technical side of it is not necessarily the thing that's going to get you through, but he does a great job as well. Look at where that he's getting that extension of that left leg and really gets, or that left arm, and also gets out in front well within that left leg, but you could see how much rotation he's creating within his spine. Right leg, he comes around a little bit too far. You know, he's going to put himself at a bit of a risk for injuries there. He's going to make it so he's not going to be able to consistently have a good foot contact time at this point. But again, there's a point where the technical side is important, and you want to be able to use that to help you to be able to resist injuries, to be able to run faster, to be able to improve your overall ability to, from a technical perspective, improve your race. Right. But there's also a time period where you need to have that heart, and you need to be able to really dig deep to be able to get into those higher speeds, or be able to pass somebody that's way in front of you, or to be able to gut it out in that last 100 meters. So, you know, sometimes the technical side, focusing on the technical side helps, but sometimes, you know, depending on the person, how you think, how you are, sometimes just saying, screw it, I'm going to win. You know, I'm a winner. I'm going to win. I got that dog. That's what you got to rely on. So 44-17 to win the U.S. 400 meter on the men's side. Great run. Thanks for watching. If you like the information, click that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We'll have a couple other links to some videos that you guys could check out if you're interested in doing that. And we'll talk to you soon. We'll be going live in a couple days with the 200 meter. That's going to be on Thursday afternoon. We're going live to cover both the women's and the men's heats. Excited for that. We'll see you guys soon.